Welcome, everyone. It's an uncharacteristically sunny November day here in South Bend. It's cool, but the campus is pristine and beautiful. Everything is eerily quiet out there as we are in the third day of finals here on campus. It's shocking to imagine that the final day of finals is just this Friday, and most all students are either on their way home now or will be heading home in the next couple of days. Every one of the students, as we mentioned last week, will be required to have a negative test before returning home. And should they not show up for their surveillance test, there'll be an academic block, which will not give them their grades and not allow them to register for classes. So they're highly incentivized to make sure that they're cleared medically before they return to their home communities. It's been not an insignificant accomplishment to get this semester under our belt, and under the incredible leadership of Father John and his team, and students who really want to be here for in-person classes. And with others, we've been able to accomplish something that I think is truly remarkable for the ages. Not without our significant mistakes and challenges along the way, but really proud of the whole team. It's my distinct pleasure today to welcome as our special guest, once again, Jack Swarbrick, who is the Vice President and James E. Rohr Director of Athletics at the University of Notre Dame. He is in his 13th year in such a role, and he is only the 12th athletic director in the history of Notre Dame athletics. He was born in Yonkers, New York, and he was raised between Yonkers and Bloomington, Indiana. Jack graduated from Notre Dame in 1976, magna cum laude. I would have thought, looking back, that he would have been summa, but you do what you can. And then he went on to get his law degree from Stanford in 1980. And probably more impressive than the law degree he picked up there, he met his beautiful wife, Kimberly, and in probably one of his greatest acts of salesmanship, he recruited her back to move back to Indiana. And we're really pleased that Jack and Kimberly have been such leaders of this university now for a long period of time, and they've raised 4 wonderful children here in Indiana. So thanks so much, Jack, for being with us. First question that we want to start out, of course, has got to be pandemic and racial unrest related. And this has been really unlike any year that clearly you have experienced as athletic director, and arguably anybody in your role has experienced in the history of Notre Dame. So can you tell us, how have you adapted? What have you learned? And what are some of the key takeaways from managing athletics during a time of a pandemic and such racial unrest?
Well, thanks, Lou, and it's great to be with you. I'm flattered to be a repeat guest. I assume this is an effort to try and have me get it right the second time, but I welcome the opportunity. One of the things our audience might not appreciate it is one of the byproducts of this is we don't get to spend any time together. Yeah. Right? I mean, I don't think you and I have been in the same physical space probably since March.
Right.
Among the things that are challenging about COVID, that's high on my list, that I don't get to spend the time, you don't get to spend the time that we'd like with our colleagues in casual conversation. So it's great to be with you, if only virtually. It's hard to get perspective on the pandemic because we're still in the middle of it. But every day it dominates your day and your night, trying to navigate the next challenge. A couple of things stand out for me. One is I've gotten incredibly comfortable with being wrong, because I'll make a decision at 10 in the morning, and by 2 o'clock, I'll have new information that tells me I was wrong. I have to change it. And everybody in our department has had to learn to be flexible and to understand that's going to happen and not have it impact you adversely. We got to be resilient. We got to be flexible. We got to be extremely creative, and they have been. So just the ongoing nature of it is part. The other observation is, and I've said this, I think the last time I was on with you and in many places, I don't know that I've ever been more proud to be at the University of Notre Dame. The leadership provided by Father John through all of this, the position we took early on to say in-person residential education is so important to who we are and our model that we're going to come back. And that set a charge for all of us to figure out how to do that successfully. But every day I encounter people, from somebody who's helping to run the department to someone who's helping to set up the facility, who does something extraordinary, who works nonstop. They're just, I have been felt so blessed by people's willingness to do whatever it takes to help this university get through it. And because they believe in the university, they believe in its values, they believe in what our effort to handle the pandemic stands for. So while it's been hard as can be, I think I'll look back on this as the most significant point in my tenure here.
Mm-hmm. You know, that's a great answer. You know, that as they say, and necessity is the mother of invention. And I remember talking recently with the folks here at ND Studios who run these programs and have stepped up and done such an incredible job. And they were telling me that they had a 5-year strategic plan that they basically accomplished in less than 7 months. What are some of the innovations that you have experienced in Notre Dame athletics that have been forged in the crucible of this pandemic that will transcend well beyond the pandemic itself?
Yeah, I think first, Lou, a lot of health and safety dynamics will continue as we move forward. We have had to change absolutely everything that touches our operation. There's literally nothing we do, from the way we handle the footballs and the baseballs, to who serves as a ball person at a volleyball match, to how we eat dinner, to how we allocate locker room space. And so every piece of this has had to change, and it's an ongoing effort, right? You never have it exactly right. You continue to evaluate it and move on. So I think a lot of those will stay in place. You know, we'll get past this pandemic, but you know, it was Ebola and it was SARS and it was COVID-19, and there'll be something else. And so I think we'll be in a better position when we hit that because of all the changes we'd make. I mean, it's one small great example, but it's fascinating. I'm the only person who has the opportunity to travel with the team, the football team, when we play. And it's so fascinating to watch that process work now. We used to take 4 buses. We take 7 buses now, so you can get adequate social distance. We've got fewer people traveling, but we need more social distance. Everybody wears an N95 mask on the flight and on the bus. When we arrive at the hotel, there's a buffet set up, and the people manning the buffet are the people who were on that flight. It's not the staff at the hotel. Father Nate is on the buffet line, and our strength conditioning staff. And then you go right to your room with that food you got in a to-go box, and you don't leave your room till the next morning. And then when we have the team meal, it's 2 people at a table with a plastic divider. It's just like being in prison and having a visit with somebody. But those are all the things you have to do. So overly long way of saying a lot of health and safety things that I think will stay with us. I think approaches to how we play and what we do that are going to be lasting. So I think we'll need to have our sports be more regional in the future. Conference expansion caused us to get pretty wide flung in who we play. I think this will cause us to restrict that, bring that back a little bit. And then we'll probably have some lasting changes in how college athletics generally is structured.
Interesting. We're going to get to that a little bit later. Let's talk a little bit about the rise of the football team. Obviously, the incredible victory over Clemson, took Notre Dame to kind of a new pinnacle in the sport in recent years. and the unblemished record, the great win over a tough Boston College squad. But it seems that the landscape of college football is more uneven than ever, especially with the Big Ten and the Pac-12 starting their seasons well after the ACC and others. Question that I know has come to many people's mind: if we qualify for the ACC championship game, which looks more likely than not, certainly at this point, is there a chance that we don't have to play that makeup game against Wake Forest on December 12th? And then also, is it hurtful to the ACC to have a conference championship game in these conditions, that we will have played so many more games than schools from other conferences, that it might keep two of the teams out of the college football playoff rather than not? So what are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, first, let the record show that the host said we're more likely than not to be in the ACC championship game. The athletic director did not. So first to the makeup game scheduled with Wake Forest. It's a conference decision, and it's really important. We have benefited, as the conference has, by having this relationship for this year. And as I've said many times, you're either in or you're not. And we decided to be in. And so that'll be our approach. I think the ACC will consider all of the interest as it moves on through the schedule. I anticipate that Wake Forest may have a lot of incentives with regard to its bowl placement that causes it to want to play. So, I just think we have to be prepared to be guided by the conference. We'll give our input. We'll offer our view, but we're going to be the good partner we've been throughout this with the ACC. Secondly, as it relates to the championship game, of course, every conference is going to have a championship game. So even the Pac-12 and the Big Ten will have championship games. So really the position you're in is to ask yourself, would there be some benefit in sort of resting on the laurels of the 11 games we are likely to play and not have the championship game? Given that a conference championship is one of the criteria of the CFP playoffs, and if everybody gets to play it, it's likely to have a lot of weight. I fear that there's more damage to not having the conference championship and resting on the 11 games than in having it. I think the conference championship plus our full schedule will both be reasons, the game, regardless of who wins the conference championship game, should both be reasons to be given full consideration.
Yeah, great. You always hear folks, critics out there question the relevance of Notre Dame football, and we see that the Notre Dame Clemson football game this year had more than 15 million viewers, the most watched college football game of the season. And then just last week, the Notre Dame Boston College game was viewed more than any other college football game, even though it wasn't in prime time during the season, and actually outdrew the Masters golf tournament, which is quite impressive. So Notre Dame's participation in football in the ACC has had a big impact on the conference. In what ways has it been really good for us? And what are you thinking down the line? Does Notre Dame find a permanent home in the ACC conference with football?
Well, it has been great for both parties, which is the essence of the agreement, right? That's what we hoped. Couldn't be more proud of those ratings that you referred to. The Duke game was actually a huge rating as well. Duke and BC were both 5 million person ratings. And of course, as you say, the Clemson game averaged over 10 and peaked at 15. And it will be the most watched game in college football this year other than the semifinals. There's no game on the docket that's going to exceed that in the regular season. So it's worked very well for us. It's we play these games. We have football. We play at the level we play because we want to promote Notre Dame.
Mhm.
15 million people had the chance to watch the "What Would You Fight For" ad.
Mhm.
That's why we do this, and it promotes the university and promotes the brand. I think we would, because of the quality of the team, had really good numbers regardless.
Mhm.
And of course, we were scheduled to play Clemson regardless of whether we joined the conference this year.
Mhm.
But the conference affiliation has helped, and there's no doubt about it. And so we've enjoyed it. It's been great, but our priority remains football independence. And while we never stop on an annual basis evaluating that and thinking about what's best for our student athletes and the university, um, I still believe that the opportunity to play in New York regularly, the opportunity to play on the West Coast every year. People listening to this have heard me say before, no school's ever played in Los Angeles, Chicago, and New York in the same year. We've now done it 9 times. That's what independence gives us. It gives us that opportunity. And so we remain committed to it, but we'll continue to evaluate it.
Terrific. Last time we spoke, Jack, we talked about the NCAA decision to allow student athletes to capitalize on image and likeness. Can you tell us, when do you think that decision will be implemented, and how will that be managed by both the NCAA and Notre Dame?
Well, you alluded to earlier sort of what keeps me up at night. That keeps me up at night. It is a revolutionary shift in college athletics, one we have supported from the outset. Father John gave an interview 5 years ago where he said our other students can benefit from name, image, and likeness. Why shouldn't our student athletes? And so it's coming. If the NCAA process controls, we'll go into the next academic year with it being activated. So think July, August. There are 2 caveats to that. One is Congress very well may act. And if Congress acts, it may be addressed sooner. And I think the chances of Congress doing something are pretty high at this point. It'll take time to get through the transition and address much more important things. But I do think Congress's interest is at an all-time high. And some of the state laws start to take effect. The earliest one is Florida on July 1. So it's coming. It's a challenge because we do not know the final form. Will it be what Congress decides? Will it be what the states decide? Will it be what the NCAA decides? So we have to sort of plan, understanding that uncertainty. And we're planning in a time where we don't have the resources. We're in a hiring freeze, appropriately so. It's what the university should be doing. And we have significant financial challenges moving forward. But now we have this massive new obligation that it has so many moving parts. We've got to educate the student athletes. We've got to be a resource to them in the deals they make. We have to track every transaction and report it to the NCAA. The list goes on and on. And so we got to figure it out. We'll probably have to move resources from something else to allow us to do it, but we'll get there.
Mm-hmm. So what are your major concerns other than financial? Are you concerned that that it might be applied unequally across the different conferences and institutions? Give us a scenario of what might really concern you.
Well, I think you can, given its newness, you can absolutely anticipate that there'll be a lot of unevenness in the application initially. Because even when the NCAA adopts legislation, there'll be more unanswered questions and answered questions, and that we'll have to work our way through. But the thing to keep in mind is the complexity of this. People tend to think of the traditional endorsement, and there will be some of that. I don't think there'll be much national endorsement activity, but there'll be a little bit. How does that relate to our existing partners? What categories do we exclude and say, this is inappropriate with Notre Dame's values or is a conflict of interest, right? So That's the traditional one. The largest area of activity will be what people refer to as social influence, right? It will be what you do on TikTok or YouTube, and what your profile becomes. That will largely occur without regard to how successful you are as a student athlete. Some of the most successful influencers among college student athletes are people you've never heard of. They're just really good on TikTok. And so that's where their value comes from. So you'll have that. Student athletes can now give instruction or conduct camps in a way they couldn't before. How do we manage that? What does that look like? How does that relate to the activity we do as an athletic department? And finally, they can launch businesses. And how does that relate to if they want to launch an athletic related business? How does that relate to something we do? So I could go on forever, but it's those complications. It's figuring out how to navigate them in a very uncertain environment and doing it in a way that benefits our students. I mean, that's our first priority here, and how to do it in a way that doesn't reduce the overall benefits for students where just a few benefit.
Yeah, you certainly could see it tipping the scales on a recruiting basis in terms of which institutions and conferences are going to be more accommodating to student athletes than others. So it'll a lot of questions, as you suggest. But some have argued that this pandemic has just been an accelerator for change. And already before the pandemic, intercollegiate athletics was on a fast track for change. Many challenges, a push for change on many different fronts. I've always seen you as one of your great strengths is thinking ahead. You've always been a visionary thinker. So if you were to kind of lay out for us, what do you see as some of the outside of image and likeness, a name, image and likeness, what are some of the major changes on the horizon for intercollegiate sports?
Well, your question really carried the answer in a sense, right? It has accelerated change. And how much and how fast, none of us knows, but there's no question it's an acceleration. The enterprise was already on an arc that was financially not sustainable. And frankly, it sounds odd to say, but for good reasons. The soft benefit to schools of having success in college athletics has been so positive for universities and has literally changed the trajectory of a lot of major universities in the United States that there's value in it. And so pursuing that benefit has caused some decisions that look just through the financial parameter hasn't necessarily made financial sense. So you're going to see, first of all, a reconsideration of investments in athletics. We've seen it with a number of schools reducing their number of sports, right? So Stanford eliminated 11 of their sports. Minnesota just had eliminated some sports. A week ago, Clemson announced that one of its sports was being eliminated. So people are going to look at that. That'll be part of it. I think that you'll see and will continue. I think people will be looking at whether the forms of affiliation continue to make sense, whether there's another round of a reevaluation of conference affiliation. And I think that there's at least going to be the reconsideration. And I'm not sure 5 Power 5 conferences will still remain at the end of that reconsideration.
You think it's smaller? There's fewer conferences or more?
It'll be smaller, or at least a restructuring within them. I think you'll certainly see that. I think you'll see a continued move from traditional broadcast relationships to more ones which are based off a streaming platform. And that's gonna cause its own reconsideration and reevaluation of how schools work. I think those changes could be very positive for Notre Dame, given our national scope and our success with Fighting Irish media to produce content. But we'll have to see. But anyway, I don't even refer to it as a change in broadcast. It's just a change in content delivery that will likely occur. So all of that, and it plays out in a context where universities more broadly are having to reconsider what they're doing. We'll have some colleges and universities that don't survive the pandemic. They just won't be with us 5 years from now, and some of that will play out in sports.
So let me ask you about any concerns you might have about the live attendance at sporting events. It's also become much more customary for people to stay in their homes that are well set up with surround sound and all kinds of viewing opportunities. It's more arduous to get fans to attend live sporting events. Do you see that continuing to be a challenge for Notre Dame and other like institutions?
I think it will absolutely occur, and it had already started. Part of it's generational. Younger people are less likely to dedicate a day to an activity or 4 days or 4 hours to the contest itself. And so we already face that challenge. The pandemic will cause some group of people to be more cautious about gathering, even after there's been a vaccine that assists us. So I think you'll have some people that are just reluctant to return to big crowd events. And then finally is the dynamic you pointed out, that the experience of consuming it in your own home with a second device and your main television and a whole bunch of things can be a pretty attractive dynamic. I think on that, we're less impacted than most because the campus dynamic is so part of coming to Notre Dame and experiencing it. But without question, across the board, it's going to be a challenge. But in that, I find great opportunity. I think what we have to do is move away from the transactional dynamic of selling a ticket to a game and become much more involved in having the fans who care about Notre Dame athletics engage with us on a host of ways. The ticket to the game is just one aspect. I hope a lot of the people listening to this have joined the Rally House, which is a second stream we've produced since we couldn't have people come to the stadium, where you've been able to watch the game and hear some of your favorite former Notre Dame student athletes talk about the game and give each other a hard time and just sort of come into that environment and talk to them. That's an example of all the things we have to do to create additional value. We have to move away from thinking we're selling you a ticket to think we're bringing you into the program. You're going to be a partner in what we do and experience it in a host of ways.
Great. Jack, you've already alluded to this, but many other top universities and beyond have been cutting sports for budgetary reasons. The impact of the pandemic has again accelerated the financial challenges for athletics departments. And my guess is that Notre Dame is not immune to that challenge. So how has it impacted Notre Dame from a budgetary standpoint? Are we at risk of cutting sports? And how do you construct a financially sustainable model for sports here at Notre Dame?
Yeah, it's a pressing question for us. In some ways, we have been as impacted as anybody in the country because so much of our revenue is tied to a single sport, almost more so than anybody else among the Power Five conferences on a relatively basis. We have a bigger budget than a lot of those schools, but they are less dependent on a single sport, and our model is very, very dependent on football. So the impact is very, very significant for us. As to how we approach it, we're very much involved right now in trying to find a way forward. Mario Morris, who leads as all things financial for us and runs our entire business operation in Notre Dame athletics, is taking a lead from us, working closely with others in the university to explore the model. As we head into the new year, we'll be coming forward with proposals to how we think we'll do this. I can't rule anything out at this point, but I'm also not prepared to say, oh, without question, we'll eliminate sports. You have to look at it holistically. What are all the pluses and minuses? Those sports provide great value to the university and to the students. So can't take anything off the table right now. We're going to evaluate every piece of it, but I'm not prepared to say we have any answers in place. We're just trying to evaluate all of them.
Mhm.
It will be critical for us, as you and I have talked about a lot, to count on the great support that the Notre Dame family gives us. There's no short-term, easy way out of this. This is a 5-year process of working through this. And we are in the great position we are with the success we're having, in large part because of the work of your staff and others and the incredible generosity of our fans who have helped Notre Dame get to the place it is right now. And so their continued support is going to be critical to us. This is probably the period of greatest need, certainly in my 13 years, but maybe in the history of Notre Dame athletics, the modern history. So we are going to ask for a lot of help that we hope our supporters can give us.
Yeah, and I think that comes in a few different forms, right, Jack? One is that, the Rockne Athletics Fund gives you kind of that expendable, unrestricted income for you to, in the short term, be able to kind of meet some of your budgetary demands and keep things afloat. And then we've been really focused in this last campaign on raising more coaching endowments and trying to endow all of the grant and aids of our students. I think we've raised, less than 20% of the money necessary for the coaching endowments and as well as for the grant and aids. So there's a lot of room for us to grow and build up a long-term solution that will be a critical new revenue stream for athletics. So we're going to be focused on that together for sure. One of my favorite Notre Dame student athletes right now is Yared Nuguse, and he just won the first ACC cross country championship, leading the team to finish first in the ACC championship and catapulting them to a number one ranking nationally, the men's cross country team. So you've had the great success this fall, not only with football and cross country, but with a number of our other athletics teams. Can you give us a little bit of an update?
Oh, I'd love to, because it's been a great fall. For our student athletes and coaches to succeed at the level they have this fall, under the circumstances we're in, everybody who cares about this university ought to be so proud of those coaches and students, because it's been remarkable. I loved that we had a game that, as you said, up to 15 million people watched, the most important regular season game of the season. And we got to talk about a member of the football team being a finalist for the best academic award one can win, right? To be a Rhodes Scholar. And he's a finalist now. Who gets to do that in a game of that magnitude? Yared, you mentioned, a really, really special young man, won the ACC championship. He, of course, is the national champion, the defending national champion in both the distance medley, but also the 1,500 meters nationally. A special young man who I would not be surprised to see him be in Tokyo for the United States. And that team, as you mentioned, now ranked number one. Our volleyball team finished the season ranked number 5 in the country. Only had one loss all fall. What that squad and that coaching staff has done to go from a program that wasn't frankly very competitive to move them to one of the best programs in the country in a very short period of time is a source of great pride. Tonight, our men's soccer team plays the number one ranked team in the country, Pitt, in the semifinals of the NCAA or the ACC Championships. If they succeed tonight, they're in the finals of the conference championship for the best league in soccer in the country. So I could go on and on. It's just under these circumstances. And the one thing we told everybody all year is it's not about your competitive performance. It's about staying healthy and having a positive experience. Don't worry about how you do competitively. Well, look how they've done competitively. It's so inspirational. They're having a great year in the classroom, and they're across the board. They're performing at a very high level.
And kudos to you and all our student athletes. Yesterday, I believe it came out that for the 14th consecutive year, we had the highest graduation rate among all schools in the country, with 98% of our student athletes graduating. And I know you've referred to that in the past as a national championship in and of itself. You want to say just a few words about that?
Yeah, well, the first thing is I find it so amazing that we've been able to do that for this many years that I really need to quit before we don't win it. I mean, this is such an amazing thing. This is like UCLA's 88 consecutive basketball games that, of course, Notre Dame ended in a famous game here, or pick your unbelievable success story in any sport in college athletics. No school will ever lead the country in that measurement for 10 consecutive years, no less 14. It'll never happen again. Mm-hmm. And it is such a great source of pride that we continue to do it. I'm expecting each year that we'll be second or third, and that's great, right? Yeah. But we keep on for the overall ranking, all sports in the aggregate, to rank first. And to do that for 14 consecutive years may be the thing I'm most proud about in everything we've accomplished in the past 13 years.
So quick question about this interterm break, which is going to be lengthier than it's ever been in modern history. Students get out this week. They don't come back till February 3rd. There's a 10-week break, but we have a number of winter sports that will be competing during that period of time. So where do you house them? How do you feed them during this period? And how do you keep them safe as we're in this kind of second wave of the coronavirus?
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. And we spent a lot of time on it and have what I think are very good plans, but our residence halls will be closed. So they will be in off-campus housing that we've made arrangements for. University's been great in helping us do that. Our dining halls won't be open, so we will feed those student athletes off campus and through different methods for making sure that they have the nutrition they need to. And so for hockey and the two basketball teams, they're in the middle of their season. Our men's basketball team will only have 5 of their games all year where students will be on campus. It's a very different experience. So for those schools, for those teams, we want it to be as positive an experience as they can. We'll be testing them regularly, just as we would if campus had all the students here. We'll make sure that they have all the health and safety precautions, and we're feeding them appropriately, and they have a good living experience. Having said that, we are going to have long days to fill, right? I mean, you can only practice for a limited amount of time, and so we have to look at the big picture and think about, okay, what are the other activities we can engage in with them that helps make this extended period very positive? Then for all the other sports, it's about working with each team and the coaches to say, how long can you wait to come back? To try and get them as close to February as possible. So, all the spring sports want to get started because their competition is going to be upon them. But how long can you wait? And some will have to start pretty early in January, but others can get a little closer to the end of mid-February, the end of February when school starts up again. And we'll work hard on that.
Any plans of welcoming fans back for hockey and basketball games?
And for hockey, the Big Ten, which of course is the conference we participate in for hockey, made a decision that it would not allow fans, and unless the Big Ten reconsiders that, hockey will continue to be limited to the parents, families of student athletes. We'll be guided by the Big Ten decision on that. Basketball, we're under the ACC rules, we're left to make that decision on our own. And we'll evaluate it as we go. I think we'll start with just parents attending and sort of see how St. Joe County's doing. We work closely with the state and the county and the city to try and decide what's the correct approach. I would hope that we start to improve beyond what we've got, where we are right now, of course, and on a county basis, not in a very good place. But as it improves, I hope we can start to expand attendance for basketball. But I don't imagine it'll be more than 10% of capacity for even under the best of circumstances.
Great. A couple questions left, Jack. One goes back to kind of your former career. You know, being one of the leading architects of amateur sports in Indianapolis. There's been a lot of talk in the last couple of days that there's a good chance that March Madness could be kind of housed in one bubble instead of being spread across the country, and that Indianapolis could very well be the site where all of this will happen. What does that look like to you? What does that mean for the city and for basketball?
Well, first of all, I think it's the right thing to do. It minimizes travel. It allows you to focus on the conditions of a single city. And so I think it is absolutely what should happen. And I'm really proud that Indianapolis is a logical choice for that. I hope that's where they wind up, because the city was really designed to accommodate that. It was a great host for the Super Bowl. It's been a great host for Final Fours, but it has the capacity to do that. It has the capacity to have 64 separate teams there and have them all essentially downtown in a close location to the facility. And so I think it's the perfect match. And frankly, Indianapolis needs it. Like a lot of cities, it's really struggled to get past the challenges imposed by the pandemic. And this would be a great source of energy and positiveness for the community that I'd be so pleased to see. But the city's built to do it. You've got the convention center, you've got the football facility, you've got the Pacers facility, you've got Butler. That's all within 5 or 6 miles of each other. So it's the perfect location. I hope they do it, and it will be a nice testament to the wisdom of how the city built itself to host things like that.
And let's hope that Notre Dame's men's basketball team will be among them and competing down there, and it'll be an exciting development. Final question, Jack, is you've been in this role for 13 years now. What still gets you up in the morning excited about your work and really keeps the fire burning?
Yeah. First of all, let me just note in response to your hope that we'll be a team playing in that men's basketball tournament. I love the fact that Mike Bray said we're gonna build the toughest preseason or the toughest season in advance of the ACC anybody in the country's ever had. I mean, we're playing Kentucky, we're playing Tennessee, we're playing Michigan State, we're playing Ohio State. This is the year to do that, right? This is the year to take that opportunity and do that. So I'm really proud of what that basketball team has done as it heads into this season. It will be tough, but I love that they decided to take that on. The thing that makes me so proud to be a small part of this university and the athletic part of the university is the students I get to work with, the young people. It's hard to put into words how great the students who represent Notre Dame through athletics are as representatives of Notre Dame and its values and what it believes in. You know, we had our advisory council meeting yesterday, and you know, you've got student athletes serving on that who just represent that, right? You're reminded when people of that level, with all the success they're having, are back helping you in that capacity.
Mhm.
You look at how our former players are doing in the National Football League right now, not just how successful they are,
Mhm.
how many of them are captains of their teams? How many of these former athletes are now leading major businesses or now teaching high school because they're passionate about that? It's typical of all of Notre Dame that the honor we have is the young people we get to work with. And in athletics, that's a special joy for me because we recruit on a national basis to find a small number of people who want to sign up for all Notre Dame represents, and that every day I get to work with them.
Mhm.
That's an extraordinary privilege. And there are a lot of things in my day that are really difficult to deal with and a challenge, but I just need to spend 15 minutes with a student athlete who's here right now to have that make everything else feel fine. Is a remarkable group of people to work with and coaches who teach them.
Well, that's a great way to end our discussion today, Jack. Thank you so much. We're blessed by your leadership. I deeply appreciate your friendship and your example. And you know, don't get too comfortable. We'll have you back and talk a little bit more soon. So thank you again. As we always do, let's close together. Whether you're in your workplace or at home, please join us in a prayer to Our Lady. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. Take care. God bless. Go Irish. Thanks again, Jack.
Thanks.